subject-verb agreement. And specifically, I'll focus on subject-verb agreement with complex subjects. And that's where it maybe gets the most confusing and where we most often see errors is just when the sentence construction gets to be more complex, it's more easy to make errors. I just wanted to do a real quick overview before we start talking about subject-verb agreement, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So the main sections of a simple sentence are the subject, which is usually a person, place, or thing, and the predicate, which shows the action or the state of being, and any maybe extra information about the sentence. So here are some examples. I am a master's student. Tom retired after 30 years of teaching. All of the employees will attend the retreat. So the first part of the predicate is the verb, which you can see underlined. And throughout this last section, we'll just focus on those first two parts, the subject and the verb. The subject and the verb in the sentence need to agree in number. And in English, regular verbs follow this pattern. I write, you write, Deborah write, we write, they write. So most of the verbs are the same. In the present tense, the only form that's different is when we're talking about, I guess, what we linguists and grammar nerds call the third person singular, or singular third person, meaning that when we're talking about one person, that is not me and not you. So in language use in English, normally it makes sense to add an S to something when we make it plural, but the rule is different for verbs, and we add an S when the verb is for a single person. So now that we know that pattern and kind of how to talk about it, let's look at some common errors in subject-verb agreement. And when it gets a little tricky because we have a complex subject. For example, when we have two or more subjects in one sentence. The committee members and the student write every day. Even though the subject closest to the verb is singular, student, we use the plural form of the verb because we're talking about a group, committee members and the student. Another common error example is when we have a complex subject. And so I'll give an example here. When we do have a complex subject, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to decide which form of the verb to use and what to match it with. So in this sentence, the nurse who normally works with pediatric patients, that's our subject. So what we need to do is look for the main subject because there are two different people or groups here. There's the nurse at the beginning of the sentence, and there's also the pediatric patients. So nurse is singular, patients is plural. So we have to kind of identify who is the main person or people that this sentence is about, and in this case, the main subject is the nurse. So the rest of the subject is a phrase that describes which nurse she is, the one who works with pediatric patients. So we need to match our verb to nurse and not to the noun right next to the verb, in this case, which is patients. So it's the nurse who volunteers. So when a phrase comes between that main subject and the verb still needs to agree with or match with the number of the main subject. And a final point about subject-verb agreement is related to non-count nouns, or when our subject is a non-count noun. In English, some nouns or things are non-count nouns, meaning that they're a type of word or noun that can't be counted. So for example, furniture or information. As an example, we don't say one information or three furniture. That sounds a bit odd in English and isn't grammatically correct. Rather, we might say something like three pieces of furniture or one bit of information. So these special kinds of nouns always take the singular form of the verb. So in this example sentence, we use is with information because that's our main object rather than are. Information about Walden's master's degree programs in education is available on the website.